Morning, Steve.
Morning, Paul.
Thanks for coming down today.
Lovely to see you. Just wanted to pop in and ask you a few questions. So tell us a little bit about the store. How long have you been open?
Right, well, the store's not actually only been open around about 10, 12 years to the public, but originally it was just purely, we had the first unit to cater for service client contracts that we were doing. So most of my early work was really in aquarium maintenance. I previously worked in the retail trade, but when I started my own business, it started off by being an aquarium maintenance guy and installations. But over time, we expanded the store to open to the public, retail. But all in all now, we're 17 years as a, actually 18 years nearly, as a business, as Advanced Aquarium Consultancy.
Wow, that's impressive. So we're just stood with your display tank. It's absolutely stunning. Obviously, you've got Radion XR15s above there. Can you tell me what the reason was for choosing XR15s?
Yeah, I think really I've always chosen Ecotech generally as a brand for the store, and also to showcase it to customers because it's a complete solution generally for any reef aquarium. So it makes sense for me to display what I believe in and to show that the lights are capable of doing what they say that they do. In terms of customer side of things, really, again, because it's that complete solution for all, whether it's a row or a hanging wire, it often fits most people's systems. And predominantly, I would say that the reason why we choose perhaps Radion over many other brands, if you like, as my main farming tools and my displays, is that the service has always been very special from Ecotech, and of course from Xodis as well. You've always carried spare parts for year upon year, whereas many other manufacturers, they tend to get lights in but then don't necessarily cover the spares or don't necessarily have the engineering department on the ground to repair a light should someone have an accident or a problem with it.
Very important.
But you know, and I think the I suppose through all of the generations of the Radion, I mean, my favourite, as I said, we come into like the G4 originally.
Yeah,
that's where that was originally G4s.
Yep.
But they've all got their qualities, if you like, amongst the Radion range. I think the newer generations with the diffused tiles give the customer that T5 look, if you like. Yeah. I was equally a fan of both models, really. And now, of course, we're moving over into the farm and onto our tables with a G6. But overall, I'm very, very pleased, and I think the results speak for themselves in terms of growth. I think I've never seemed to have any problems with growing corals under Radion, so I've sort of pretty much stuck with what I know, you know.
That's great. So I was here about 5 months ago. You begged us for the narrow angle lenses for such a long time that when they first came out, you were the first store in the UK, to my knowledge, to actually fit them to your coral table. And I just wanted to ask, have you seen any differences in the coral since you've put them up? How have you found that?
I think they're absolutely invaluable, particularly for store use. So I would warn hobbyists, don't put them on if you've got quite a shallow aquarium. The Radions are perfectly okay without them. But if you've got quite a deep tank, or you've got, as we'll go and see in a minute, we'll go and look at the SPS corals. In my situation, for wild SPS corals, I think they're invaluable. We'll go and see them now. Yeah. Okay, so the main difference, really, I've found with the new lenses is that we're able to concentrate the light more rather than spreading the light. See, this is where, you know, I used to nag you, didn't I? Oh, Steve, we want a new version of a G4 to get the focus. And of course, with dealers, Steve, particularly, we have to have our lights this high in order, so from a health and safety perspective, so that customers can view the corals properly. So from a store perspective, the lenses are invaluable. Also, of course, if you had a really deep aquarium, that would make a huge, huge difference. But as I said, that's the main issue, is this distance to there where we've not got the option to keep the lights that Ecotech recommended 9 inches off the surface like the RMS provides. So I wouldn't recommend the lenses for an average domestic home aquarium that's say 50 centimetres or something, unless you had SPS floor to bottom. I don't think it's needed. But if you're in a situation whereby you've got a tank, say at 24, 27, 30 odd, then maybe I would consider the lenses if your main focus is SPS corals. But one thing, when we change these lenses out, I knew that I could get away with the same percentages that I was running because we were falling short of par. So we literally didn't change any of the percentages at all. We just whacked the lenses on and left the settings as they were, and I saw a marked improvement. You remember that these are all ocean grown or wild, so these are really the most trickiest of all, really, to give them the light levels that they need, and of course corresponding with nutrients. But we're even getting new tip growth on mariculture specimens within a few weeks, so that says a lot about those new lenses. Yeah, I'd say I'd really recommend them. If you're falling short of par and SPS is your focus, you probably want the lenses. If your tank's a mixed reef and you've got, you know, the usual fare at the bottom, your Trachophilia and Blastomussa and things like that, but you fancy trying the lenses, I would dial down that intensity.
Just reduce it down.
Reduce it down. Start low. You'll never kill a coral with too little light, you know, straight away, but you could kill a coral with too much light straight away.
So this is where the
start it off.
will work well.
Absolutely, I would definitely use the acclimation mode on your Mobius settings. Recently just received a light that doesn't have any coral acclimatization mode on it, and I think that's a light that's falling short of what it could do. So, you know, overall, I would say they're really worthwhile, the lenses. They're very cheap. The nice thing about it is that they're not that expensive either. So it's a product that, you know, hobbyists can afford, yeah, without it costing an arm, leg, or changing it. And that sort of reiterates back to what I was saying earlier on about Ecotech is a sort of solution that never really stops redeveloping. So, you know, the nice thing about Ecotech is every 2 or 3 years we see some sort of evolvement. I know some hobbyists think that's like, oh, well, I've bought those lights, so I should have bought. But no, you know, the lights, every light that's ever come out from Radian's always been the best light it can be at the time.
Yeah. So, as you know, now Xodis are the UK distributor of Neptune. I know you've been a huge fan of Neptune for a long time and use it throughout all of the store. Is there anything that's ever saved you from any sort of crisis in store by using the Neptune systems?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how stores don't operate without Neptune, quite honestly, because I'll give you a scenario. Recently, there was power failure on the store, which happens. Everyone goes through power failure here and there. But what was really reassuring at 2 o'clock in the morning was then reopening my Neptune and seeing that my flow monitoring system on my main return pump was then providing water again to the fish. Now, in days of old, that would have meant I'd have to leave home, come in and make sure that this pump had restarted and that things were running. So Neptune's not only really a time saver for me, but it's a life saver for me. I mean, in certain situations, like the main display tank here, it's predominantly just monitoring. It's not really controlling much. It's controlling the temperature and the fans, the cooling system. But other than that, I'm just using it to monitor. I prefer to be the controller, if you like, on my display. But on things like the fish system, it's more to do with the alarms. And again, with my seahorse project at home, one of the things that's really helped me out with that is the level sensors. Again, if you're a Neptune user, I would say that without level sensors, you know, you're missing a trick, because from a level sensor on your return pump section, you can tell so much. As my ATO over-delivered water? As my ATO not delivered water? So there are some huge benefits from Neptune. And irrespective of, as I say, its ability to give you information, of course, you can build into it an awful lot of controls. And certainly out on our exterior works, where Neptune's used extensively by Aquarium Composition on our behalf, it's an absolute godsend. So he's monitoring 26 systems with the notifications coming in all the time, so that we can make sure that customers' aquarium aquariums, especially for some of our customers, are not always in the UK. It gives us another window into those people's aquariums.
So it's a real belt and braces.
It's a belt and
safety.
braces system. If you think that the price of corals nowadays, you know, if you was to buy 5 decent corals, that'd be £1,000, say, if they were decent, you know, LPS colonies. So 5 torch corals, you know, you know, a Neptune system is cheaper than that.
Yep.
So for me, it doesn't make any sense. If you're into expensive corals and expensive fish, and even if you're not, and you care, even if it's not expensive, and it's about the animal welfare. So I know that our pet licensing lady, when she saw that we had computer monitoring on our systems, on our livestock, that made her very happy too. So as a store owner, I don't see how you can be without Neptune. Yep. Again, another reason why we choose Neptune perhaps over other brands, and why some companies have not made it onto AAC shelves, is down to service again. So one of the things I really like about Neptune for the end user is that should they experience failure with a product, which happens, you know, this is easy for them, that they can literally write their own return. They've, you know, contacting the RMA system, getting some technical support. I've even had customers tell me about times where California has rang the UK to make sure that things are working well. So it comes down to really service as well. And I think that's the core reason why I choose Xodis based brands, is because of that service that I get. I've never had a problem, and I know that many of my customers that have contacted Xodis, whether it's about Neptune or Ecotech, have always had first class service. And I'm not just saying that for the camera. Yep. That's how you get into AAC. That's how you get product on the shelves. You know, there's no point having the world's greatest anything if the service isn't there.
That's lovely for you to say, thank you. Can I just ask, how long's this tank been running now for?
This part of the store was opened around about 8 years ago. So this is coming up 8 years. That's right, it's 8 years since its conception. And the rock work's never changed. I mean, there could be a point actually in the coming year whereby we strip it all down, because I fancy having a bit of a change, and time, you know, corals have grown out, and don't matter how many times I clip them, it still needs a good weeding here and there.
Yep. So talking about the display, Paul, what's your favourite fish?
I think my favourite fish is a fish that I've had nearly 20 years, which is my black tang. The black tang actually was originally sold by me to a customer that sadly passed away, and that was say around about 14 years ago, and it was passed to me in his will. And the reason why I love my black tang is because he's not actually really a black tang. He's a black tang Scopaz hybrid. He's never really grown. I've had to rescue the poor fella about 7 times where he was previously, because he kept contracting white spot back in the days, early days. So he's been through the wars and he's still with me to this day. That makes him really special for me. Not because he's a high value, rare fish, but just purely because it was passed to me and it was special to me.
So he's now part of the family?
He's part of the family. I mean, I don't know how much longer we'll have with him. I don't know how long he could possibly live for. You know, there are some reports that Zebra Soma will go on to be 40 years old. At the moment, like I said, about 18, 19 years.
Wow. And what's your favourite coral, Paul?
Well, some of my favourite corals are probably not everybody's favourite corals, because obviously you'd imagine it's going to be something really flashy or really high end. But for me, it's always about really not so much necessarily the rarity, but it's about certain characteristics of a coral that makes it really special. So for me, it's my Gorgonia ventellina, which is a light-loving sea fan. It looks like an NPS coral, a non-photosynthetic coral, but in actual fact, it is a photosynthetic coral, and you can't really get them anymore. I was very lucky that Thomas de Jong's father, Harry, has a place in Cuba, and we were able to track these via Cuba, which doesn't come under the American Fisheries and Fauna, where you can't collect them anymore. They were plummeted many, many years ago for decoration and things like that, and also used by, I believe, Estee Lauder as part of their makeup franchise for looking at rejuvenating creams and things like that. So they were plummeted in the 70s and the 80s, and then they became illegal to collect. However, they are actually very easy to keep. They're not too difficult at all. So we are starting to farm these now. We've got small frags available in the farm, but they don't grow particularly fast as small juveniles. We're hoping to speed that up with the new elements of the farm that we're bringing in. It could be down to nutrition. But for me, the Gorgonia ventellina, the sea fans that are featured in these sea fans are really my favourite coral, really.
I don't think I've ever actually seen those.
Yeah, there's one or two around. I've spread a few frags around now. Hopefully we'll see it. I've even encouraged the idea that these should go into the coral spawning programme with Jamie, because I believe that it would be really nice to have, although I can frag them, it's slow. I'd love to get these to spawn at some stage.
So speaking of coral, Paul, what would you say, in your opinion, are the easiest and the hardest coral to keep?
Well, I mean, that question sort of nowadays, you would normally say SPS corals are more difficult than a lot of other corals to keep. But in actual fact, I don't think that's the case anymore. The understanding and the knowledge that we now have with chemistry, and of course great lighting as well, with nowadays, I don't believe that any corals are beyond the reach of most people to keep. Of course, there's a learning process, as there is with anything, whether it's gardening or cooking or something like that. So we all start somewhere where we believe that corals are difficult to keep. But as long as you study the species directly and focus more on the species, less on the cartoon name and more on the actual species, then that should serve you well. But in terms of like what corals should a beginner avoid, I would say non-photosynthetic species are coral species such as things like, you know, sun corals and dendronephrya and carnation corals and things like that. There would definitely not be something I would recommend to a beginner. However, I do have some clients that are already specialising in that field and taking that area of the hobby into new territory, which is really exciting to me. But in terms of light-loving corals, photosynthetic corals, I believe that really nowadays you're in a place where you can pretty much whatever your dealer is showing you is possible. You know, there was a time where, like I said, we would say that Acropora was the most difficult, but as long as we meet its requirements, then I don't really feel that SPS corals are any more difficult than LPS corals.
So thank you for your time today, Paul. Really enjoyed coming to store.
Yeah, cheers, pal.
Great to see you. Just before I leave, one last question. Is there one piece of advice that you could give that really would help everybody out there?
I think for me, it's the obvious piece of advice. It would always be about stability, but I don't just necessarily mean about chemistry. You know, referring back to lighting, Ecotech, for example, give you the possibility of doing anything that you want to with your lights, from percentages, some overall percentages and colour spectrum changes and things like that. And in the past, sometimes that's confused beginners. So I would say that follow those templates that Ecotech give you, like the AB plus spectrum. Over time, you can slightly modify them a little bit, but don't make too many changes with lighting. The times, especially people that are new to the hobby, they'll try and set their lights to the way that they like them. The advice I would give is think about the animals. You know, they did not grow up in a Smurf blue environment. Try and give them a balanced spectrum. Most of the corals that we find are usually within 10 or 15 metres that are for sale in most shops. So we should be providing them a more balanced spectrum than we're currently seeing. So that would be my #1 bit of advice, a balanced spectrum, at least for a portion of the day, not too blue.
That's great, thank you.